Kaido, Roger made the world come to heel with his haki, in an era that saw the primes of the likes of the original Yonko, Garp, Sengoku, Shiki, etc. During his reign, he was the man, only rivaled in power by the world's strongest man, Whitebeard, and the hero of the Marines, Garp. Yes, you could have called the era before this Roxas, but that era didn't have the level of contemporaries that Roger's did. Look at the reactionary nature that Emu now has towards Roger. He treats Roger's bloodline the same way he treated the Davy clan. Any and all members must be snuffed out. Potential wives, potential children, Ace, everyone must go. They carry the blood of the man Emu now sees he underestimated. Because you asked Emu today if he could remove one man at God Valley. In hindsight, and knowing what he knows now, the answer would be obvious. Remove Roger from the timeline and deal with the aftermath of Rox's much too early attempts at the throne.
And another thing, you said, Roger's name was suppressed after he found the One Piece. They decided to hide the D. Rox's name literally was suppressed to the point no one in the world could ever know who he truly was. And that's a much deeper suppression than Roger has ever had.
Evaluating threat levels, Roger and Rox.
Are we going back to this argument?
Yes. Recently.
It's disrespect again.
It's not disrespect. Recently, we've been having debates about the threat level that Rox D. Xebec and Gol D. Roger pose to the world government at different times in their journey. I'm here to break down the clear gap in that threat to Emu that was faced with each of these men, and why, if he could do it all again, God Valley would have gone much differently. I'll break this down across a few different areas for Roger at the end of his journey and Rox at God Valley. And in my opinion, Roger surpassed Rox in all of them. But let's begin with these two pirates' ambitions. Roger's ambition is often undersold in the Rox debate. People frame Rox wanting to become the king of the world as inherently grander than Roger wants to find the final island. But that ignores Roger's deeper goals. Roger himself told Rayleigh in their first meeting that he wanted to turn the world upside down, which already tells us that his dream was never just about sailing solely for the sake of adventure. On top of that, Roger shared another hidden dream with Whitebeard and Odin, one so profound and absurd that Luffy is later directly tied to that same dream by Shanks. Roger was not just a man chasing an island. He was a man chasing something world-altering. Laugh-Tale was not the totality of his ambition. It was the road to it. Rox's ambition was to seize the world from the top down. Roger's ambition was to overturn the world itself from its foundations. That first ambition is to be expected, and to be honest, is easier to counter. That second kind of ambition is actually harder for a regime like Emu to survive. Now, let's move on to their strength. Roger was stronger. As per Kaido, Roger made the world come to heel with his haki, in an era that saw the primes of the likes of the original Yonko, Garp, Sengoku, Shiki, etc. During his reign, he was the man, only rivaled in power by the world's strongest man, Whitebeard, and the hero of the Marines, Garp. Yes, you could have called the era before this Roxas, but that era didn't have the level of contemporaries that Roger's did. It had Herald, but as the narrator suggests in chapter 1167, the other legends of that time, such as Whitebeard, Kaido, and Big Mom, wouldn't reach their primes for another decade or two, i.e. Roger's era, which means Roger dominated in an era where those opponents were at their peak, and he did so in grand fashion. Like I always say, when every Rox pirate met their pirating end, it's Roger they thought about. Even if Rox was stronger than Roger at God Valley, which in itself is debatable, then Roger clearly became stronger than Rox over the course of his time in the Grand Line and on his way to becoming the Pirate King. Next, Roger's wealth of knowledge. Proverbs 24:5 says, "A wise man is powerful, and with knowledge, a man increases his power." And Roger knew more. At God Valley, Roger senses Emu's haki. He sees the figure of Emu beginning to possess Saturn. In response, he says, "What grand days of adventure we live in. I still have so much to learn." And learn he did. Roger was able to make it to the final island, Laugh-Tale, where, as Rayleigh put it in chapter 507, they learned the true history of the world. Now, while Rox does seem to know much about his clan, their rightful place on the throne, the importance of Elbaf, about some specific devil fruits and the Galley Law that can assist with becoming the king of the world, he doesn't seem to know everything. Rox outright told Loki that he doesn't know who Nika is. That's such a major knowledge gap to me. Rox may have a version of the story, but he doesn't have the full scope and picture that Roger was able to uncover on Laugh-Tale. Roger's knowledge extends not just to the past, but to the future and what's to come with the next Joy Boy and Poseidon. He also took action on that knowledge, but more on that in a bit. As far as how knowledge relates to threat level, just ask the people of Ohara, Lelucia, and Egghead what kind of threat knowledge is to Emu and his regime. Next, influence. Roger was more influential. Roger imposed his will on just about everyone he interacted with, whether swashbuckling just to hang out with Shaki, convincing Garp to raise his child, or capturing the love and admiration of a future great pirate like Shanks. Whatever Roger wanted to do, he did, without restraint, during his pirating days. That charisma he carried about him is what made Odin see him in a grander light than even the Great Whitebeard. It is how he fostered a crew of true, loyal, and strong followers like Rayleigh and Gabon. The Pirate King's wings came back for him at God Valley because they were worried. Unspoken attacks from Rocks ended any partnership he, Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido had, while the rest of the Rocks pirates quarreled amongst themselves over treasure, devil fruits, and Shaki, showing just how fragile that bond was in the first place. And, to be honest, Rock's means of gathering crewmates through Davy-back fights likely didn't help him there. If that's all it took for the crew to fracture, then said crew definitely wouldn't survive an outright confrontation with the world government, no matter how strong its leader was. Rocks was never able to make anyone strive to put him on the empty throne, but Roger's crewmates, just like Shanks and Luffy's after him, were all willing to die for their captain's ambitions. Roger also made friends across the world with the likes of King Neptune of Fishman Island, Gonfall from Skypiea, and the shipwright Tom, among others. That influence, among others, is a dangerous proposition. As Mihawk observed about Luffy, Roger possessed the ability to turn those around him into allies. I can't outright say this for Rocks, who failed to recruit even his best friend, Harold. Now let's talk fame. Roger became the most famous person in the history of the One Piece world when he became the king of the pirates. Gold Roger became a household name, the equivalent of Michael Jackson, or dare I even say Jesus Christ, within the realm of the One Piece world. There isn't a man, woman, or child who isn't familiar with the legend of Gol D. Roger. This fame is so overwhelming that Imu and the Gorosei determined it necessary to hide the D in his name on his bounty to decrease the number of people who would inquire about it. Obviously, Rocks was never able to reach these levels of fame as his legacy was all but erased at God Valley. That type of fame, when coupled with the aforementioned influence, knowledge, strength, and ambition, is what makes Roger so dangerous to Imu, because it's one thing to know something that the powers that be don't want you to know, and to outright challenge the top of the world. But it's another to have influence to share it, to have the power to protect yourself and ensure the message is delivered. And this is where I think the debate that Larry and others in the community are having is misconstrued. Imu knew the threat that Rocks truly possessed with his power, knowledge, and ambitions. Rocks made it very clear to him. He took several actions to remove Rocks from the world as a result. Imu's threat evaluation of Rocks was sound, but it wasn't sound for Roger. That's the difference. Roger essentially became everything Imu fears. Strong enough to fight back, charismatic enough to gain the necessary allies, knowledgeable enough to reveal the truths of the world that he didn't want out there, famous enough that a message from him was guaranteed to be heard, and connected enough to inspire the world, the wrong people to act, and above all, tactful enough to know when and where to share that message. Roger's speech at his execution was a global spectacle that everyone took note of. It inspired an entire generation of people to the sea and search for the One Piece, for the true history of the world. That one moment shifted the balance of power in the world so drastically that Imu and the world government had to take action. After all, look at the reactionary nature that Imu now has towards Roger. He treats Roger's bloodline the same way he treated the Davy clan. Any and all members must be snuffed out. Potential wives, potential children, Ace, everyone must go. They carry the blood of the man Imu now sees he underestimated. Because you asked Imu today if he could remove one man at God Valley. In hindsight, and knowing what he knows now, the answer would be obvious. Remove Roger from the timeline and deal with the aftermath of Rocks' much too early attempts at the throne. He would have been in a much safer and more secure position if he had. So yes, Rocks is goated, and yes, Imu thought of him as a true catalyst and threat. But at the end of the day, Roger had the more dangerous ambition, was stronger, more knowledgeable, more famous, more influential, and knew what to do with these gifts. The story is named after Roger's treasure for a reason. Wealth, fame, power. Gold Roger, the king of the pirates, attained this and everything else the world had to offer. But Roger didn't just attain these three things. He became the one man dangerous enough to use them all against the world itself. And in the end, he did just as he told his first mate when they met all those years ago. He turned the world upside down. All right, that's the Roger Rocks threat level analysis.
Yeah, I'm so fresh like the morning. Mouth wide open like they yawning. Every time they see me, they in G-Shock. Homie, this is too far. Homie, I feel too alive. You can see me like Illuminati. You can see me like Illuminati. But I'm shining so bright, so bright. Don't come and try to share some of this light now. Give me a beat and I control it like a maestro. Ladies on a mission, they be trying to get me wiped up. Shawty, wait a minute, can't tell if I like ya. Gotta make sure you know how to shake it like a bartender. Team with me and they all winners. And you know we ballin' all winners.
I will open for rebuttals, Larry, if you want. Oh man, that was a lot of talking.
I think you just said a whole lot of garbage.
You think so?
Absolutely. Just saying whose era was stronger is completely falsified too. You only say this because you know Roger's era. You don't know Rox's era. You don't know who was sailing the seas during that time. We don't have detailed descriptions of it. But we do know that they both had the same enemy, who was Emu. And the thing is, one person fought Emu, the other person didn't. Even after they left God Valley. And then you tried to say that Roger knew more, which is also not definitive because we do not know, based upon what Davy's message was and all this information that Rox knew about, to the point he could literally walk into Mary Joa and see Emu for himself, where Roger has never done that. Roger had to get to the One Piece and learn who Emu was in order to even know who Nika was. So even after he found the One Piece, he still wasn't able to do anything. And the difference about their crews being built, I don't know why you keep continuing on with like, well, their crews, one would sacrifice for the captain, the other one wouldn't. Meanwhile, we saw at God Valley that the 3 strongest crew members on his crew recognized him as a true captain and a true friend before they thought he betrayed them through Domi Reversi. They even Whitebeard himself says, yo, do you really just see us as a hindrance? And I think that you keep bringing that up, but if that Domi Reversi never happened, that crew forms that relationship because it was built during that moment. It was built during God Valley. And another thing, you said, yo, Roger's name was suppressed after he found the One Piece. They decided to hide the D. Yo, Rox's name literally was suppressed to the point no one in the world could ever know who he truly was. And that's a much deeper suppression than Roger has ever had. We're talking about an initial compared to the man himself in the happenings and taboos that he created upon the world. And then you even go on to say, well, Roger was apparently strong enough to fight back. He was strong enough to fight back to his contemporaries. He wasn't strong enough to fight back against Emu and the world government. Yeah, he might have had a couple holy knights come through and try to take Shanks back. But did Emu ever come and try to take Shanks back? Did he ever roll up to Mary Jo and say, yo, Gorosei, let's bang out? I don't remember that happening. So, in my eyes, they suffered the same defeat. One just knew something, another one didn't. And that's where it leads to this whole Roger speaking at the execution about the One Piece and him garnering all this fame and being as famous as Jesus or Michael Jackson. One, he was never going to talk about the One Piece until somebody asked him.
That's not canon, by the way.
He literally went onto the podium and he was allowed to speak. No matter what you say, if Emu really figured him to be the threat that he was, Emu would have just came down when he was locked up because he was locked up by the Marines. He could have been just transferred to Mary Joa, and then he could have literally just been transformed by Domi Reversi or forced a covenant upon him. And that would have been it. But instead, he got the ability to walk towards a platform, an execution, and then speak to a massive crowd. So I don't know why we keep going back to like the most dangerous aspect between the two. The point is, if things were going to play out the way they were going to play out, Emu would have saw the future of Roger and would have saw the future of Rox. He would have deemed both of them dangerous. But what makes Rox so much more dangerous is that he knows Emu, and he knows Emu exists, and he knows Emu is there, and he could share that information to the world. The same way Vegapunk just did that, sort of. I don't understand, bro. This is like a back and forth conversation. Like, even the stronger, like dude couldn't even get past Whitebeard, if we being honest, and he didn't even have an era named after him because of it. I just don't understand. If you can't defeat the world government knowing what you know, and Rox knew what he knew, you're saying, well, Roger's more dangerous because he knew who Nika was? Well, Roger didn't know who Emu was the entire time of his pirating career. He only knew about Emu the last year of his pirating career. Literally. That was the only time he knew probably who Emu was. And that's us guessing that the One Piece talks about Emu. So figuring out the poneglyphs and all that stuff, well, guess what? Rox had that at the beginning of his pirate career. I don't get it, bro. And it's not even Rox days. It's just these are facts.
It doesn't sound like you listened to what I said.
I did listen to it.
It doesn't sound like it.
I took notes.
It doesn't.
I clearly took what you said and just reversed it on you. There's no point to that.
It don't sound like you listened to what I said. But that's okay. You're gonna have to chop it up later anyway.
Brother's crazy, bro.
I have
Brother's crazy.
I have
bro.
a couple more. They're much shorter. if that makes you feel better. And they're not about rocks.
I hope
or Roger.
not, because that was terrible, bro. It was literally you looking at that video I edited and put together from our conversation, and you were like, yo, let me just reiterate the same things, but with like a little bit more context. Mm-hmm. And the same points have just completely been nullified once again. Uh-huh. I don't understand the rocks hate. I really don't.
It's not rocks hate. I don't
really
feel like anything I said was rocks hate. I just don't get the
understand
Roger disrespect.
It's not Roger disrespect. It's just that you give Roger all of these, and this is you. You don't like definitive things, right? You're not a definitive person. But for some reason, when it comes to Roger, it's definitive. He knew that he was going to turn himself in and speak to a massive crowd and then initiate the Great Pirate Era by telling them about the One Piece. It's definitive that he was stronger, yet, like, because of his crew and the sacrifice, he was more important and more dangerous because of the knowledge that definitively, whatever the One Piece spoke about, we know nothing of what the One Piece spoke about. We just know that there's history there that is interpreted, and then we have to figure out what to do afterwards. And it involves Nika. That's it. There's nothing else. That's all we know. And then in 20 years, there's supposed to be something going on. So if anything, it's a prophecy. But we don't know exactly what it truly says. So you can't say, yo, Rocks knew less than Roger just because he didn't know who Nika was. Well, Roger didn't know who Emu was until probably he went to the One Piece. And even then, that's guesswork on our part, saying that Emu's included in it.
I would assume Emu's included in the true history of the world, but I could be wrong.
We don't know that. Because
we don't know that Emu's included in the true history
because the true history of the world doesn't probably include Emu in the first world.
I said the true history of the world. That includes,
you know what I'm saying?
Probably all the world.
But we don't know any of that. And you're speaking definitively as if it does mean that. So you give Roger this pedestal while bringing Rocks down.
I'm not bringing Rocks down. I highlighted the things he knows. I went out of my way to highlight them. But all right, we don't gotta agree, bro. We don't. Just know.